All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2023 Canadian Championship preview. We will be here for about an hour or so. We don't want to obviously get over the Champions League games. I know a lot of you guys will want to watch those as well as us, but it's myself, Josh Deming, as well as my colleague, Alex Gange-Rusick. And today we will break down all the matches coming up this week in the Canadian Championship, talk about potential matches to come with TFC and the Whitecaps, and chat with you guys as well. So if you have any questions, any thoughts, opinions, get them into the chat and we will vibe off of each other about it. First things first, Alex, how are you doing today?
Good, excited. It's always, good times when the Canadian Championship's back. It's a tournament I enjoy fondly. It's one that's grown a lot over in recent years. So just super excited to see how it's gone from, I remember being, a young child going to these Whitecaps versus Toronto games. That's all there was, even, I guess, if we really want throwback, Whitecaps versus FC Edmonton, because that's all that really was. There was 5 teams in the Canadian Championship. So when I see FC Laval, TSS Rovers, Vaughan, all these CPL teams along with the MLS sides, it means a lot just to see how much the tournament's grown. So super hyped for all that.
And you recently went to the Rovers practice, right? Or you were just there? Yeah. So let everyone know how excited that they are, just for a quick set. But I'm just in the background here. I'm gonna bring up for you guys a nice where is it? No, that's not it. Right here. There it is. That's a nice visual. Look at that. So there we go. Look at that. That's a good one. Sorry, I was just trying to get that up for you guys. But that is a 2023 Canadian Championship bracket. So just kind of, we can talk about it a little bit as well. But I thought that was a nice visual for you guys today. But yeah, tell us about
your John Bruce from Canada Soccer Graphics for making those. He's good at what he does, so shout out to him.
Credit where credit's due. But there you go. Just so in case anyone doesn't know of the matches that are happening or the potential bracket and where, TFC and the Whitecaps are waiting, that is it. Looks like a lot of fun. But we'll go into the chat here quickly to get some questions in here. Luke's here and he says, love this tournament. I want to see a CPL club win it. I mean, Forge were obviously close, but Alex, I guess just to kind of bounce off that question and let us know in the chat as well, if you think a CPL, maybe that's not the brightest question because maybe it is Forge, but if you think a CPL club could go all the way this year, maybe even looking at the bracket, who's got the friendliest path, who are you maybe backing for that wildcard CPL final appearance?
Yeah, I mean, Forge is certainly one based on how the draw has gone out for them. I think, as well, looking Ottawa. I do like they seem the team built for tournament soccer. Of course, we have a few Ottawa fans in here, so I'm sure they'll love that. They'd host the Forge game, which is always an edge. Of course, they would have to go away in the semifinal, which would be tough. So any of those two teams, I think one that's slept on is whoever wins this Pacific Cavalry game, just because they'd host the quarters, they'd host the semifinal, they'd host the final, and they'd avoid an MLS team till the semifinal. Hey, if they can get on a bit of a run, all those games at home, yeah, the Whitecaps beat a few CPL teams last year, but they've, historically on the road, it hasn't been easy for them. They drew Cavalry in 2019. They lost to Pacific on the road in 2021. Even last year, the only road game they played against the CPL team, they drew and only won on penalties. It's something where Pacific, Cavalry could be confident. Even, I guess, Valour or Rovers based on how things go there. But I think my top two, if I just had to narrow it down, Pacific, Forge, but Ottawa Cavalry, certainly don't forget about them.
Valour are at the very top of your power rankings, and Dos Santos' side had an impressive start to their campaign. Really impressed me. So, that gritty way of playing could be some tournament football magic happening there. But we'll keep going through the chat. But just to kind of get things rolling here, we will talk about the first matchup happening today at 7 o'clock. I was just trying to think if one was, but no, they're both at 7 o'clock. So we'll start with Forge and Laval. So Alex, I mean, we just kind of touched on Forge. I think that this is a club that obviously want to go all the way, want to do something special in this tournament. I think that they have the depth. They're just a difficult team. They're hosting this match as well. Do you want to throw a little love Laval's way? Do you think, some cup magic could happen here, or what are you thinking for this matchup?
Yeah, I'm excited just because Laval comes from the PLSQ, obviously their first time in this competition, but PLSQ has been a heck of an opponent for teams in this competition. I mean, I think back to 2019, they ended up winning or no, in 2018 it was League One versus PLSQ. PLSQ won. That was a big thing. And then in 2019, they narrowly lost 1-0 to York, 9 at the time. Blainville, this is in both cases. And then 2021, Blainville went to Halifax. It was a heck of a game, if you remember that correctly. Halifax narrowly won 2-1. And then last year as well, they went up against Forge and did so well. They just seemed to match up well against these CPL sides. So I'm looking at Laval. It's unfortunate they got Forge away, which is not an easy draw. But these PLSQ teams, they've got a lot of talent. And this Laval team's organized. They only allowed 13 goals last year in the PLSQ. So they're very good defensively. If they can just lean onto that and maybe get some goals in their ranks, it's one that the PLSQ teams have shown that they can frustrate CPL teams in flashes.
Yeah, 100%. And we had a nice comment from Alan here. Alistair Johnson played in the L.
So did Ryan Raposo.
So did Ryan Raposo. So nice little shout out there, Alan. But yeah, no, I'm definitely excited. But I did see Barca Boy in here who said Forge, Ottawa quarterfinal, which could be a nice little matchup as well. And I believe this is the Barca Boy who has a YouTube channel, if I'm not mistaken. So I mean, shout out to him. I'm pretty sure he's Canadian. So Barca Boy, if you're still in the chat, do let me know if you are Canadian, because if so, I may reach out to you sooner rather than later. But all right, Jeff, what do you got here? Which CPL? Okay, did I path? We kind of answered that, I guess, the path. But I do like that that Forge Ottawa pathway as well. But you were saying, Alex, I don't know. What do you think?
I think the Pacific Cavalry one's stronger just because they'd host the semifinal. Whereas
that's true.
Whereas Forge, Halifax, Ottawa, Laval, if they play Toronto or Montreal, it's in Toronto or Montreal. Assuming Vaughan doesn't go all, never know. Maybe Vaughan has a little magic in them. So I think that does help a lot, because you look historically at teams, CPL or MLS teams visiting, it's been close. Montreal went to Forge, it took penalties to beat them back in 2021. Toronto last year had to go to Halifax, narrowly won 2-1. We know about the Whitecaps. We mentioned their history with CPL teams on the road. Whereas at home, things are different. Like Whitecaps beat York last year, Valour. There weren't any issues there. Even when Pacific hosted York and when Toronto hosted York and Pacific in 2021, York they beat handily. Pacific was a little tighter, but I think it would be a big edge just to host at Starlight or at Atco Field, given how advantageous those stadiums are for those teams, or of course Valour at IG Field or Rovers at Swangard. There's all advantages for all four of those teams to host an MLS team at home.
Yeah, the hosting definitely, I would agree, probably throws it that way. But we have Atletico Ottawa here in the chat, so just know that I was going for you guys. You guys got a nice pathway as well, but Alex does make a very good point in terms of hosting, and it can be tricky. But as you guys obviously know, there is only 3 MLS clubs in this tournament. I did just have a comment here. It's from Jeff, and he says, "Is this year's competition the Whitecaps to lose?" I think it's a very intriguing question, because Alex, if we take a look at the 3 MLS clubs, which again, just on paper, they're the favorites. CF Montreal is not in great form right now. We'll get to their matchup with Vaughan a little bit later, but TFC, I think it's definitely going to be up to it. The Whitecaps, I would say, probably out of the 3 MLS sides so far, have had the best start to the season. I mean,
yeah,
ish. I mean, they had.
I think this is the Whitecaps tournament to lose. I think I'd agree with Jeff, just because they're the champions in MLS play. They have the most points. Obviously, Toronto's been doing well not to lose, which is good in a tournament, but they're not necessarily winning. The Whitecaps, of course, their Champions League run didn't end as well as they would have hoped. So maybe they'll add a bit of fire here to win and get back to the Champions League through this competition. Plus, they have the more favorable draw. They'd be on the road for the semifinal, but they'd host the final, which is always a huge advantage, as we know. So yeah, I'd say this is definitely the Whitecaps tournament to lose, based on the roster, the draw, just their overall form.
Yeah, it's tough too, just with the firepower of TFC. But I mean, just if you look at league play as well, I mean, I do like what the Whitecaps are doing, and me and Alex have talked about this before the season even kicked off, that a lot of times the history of clubs competing in the CONCACAF Champions League, as well as the start to their MLS season, they can go drastically different. I mean, Seattle is a staple, a club that makes the playoffs, and last year went all the way to the finals and won the CONCACAF Champions League, and had a dreadful start and ended up missing the playoffs. So it can have a real impact. So I personally have been very impressed with how the Whitecaps have balanced. Now, they went up against a very tough LAFC side and were eliminated, but the fact that, right now, Alex, correct me if I'm wrong, they are sitting in I mean, they extended it to 9, but they're sitting in a playoff place right now, early on, right?
Yeah, and you know they've undefeated in a good handful of games as well. They got a couple of wins. Like in MLS play, they're doing very good for a Champions League team. Really, the only blemish was that they lost 6-0 to LAFC. Like if they, you know, had they made it a little closer, it would have been okay. Yeah. You hold your head high, but certainly in terms of MLS play, I mean, they're doing better than a lot of other Champions League level teams have been doing.
I mean, and that LAFC team is flying right now. So
juggernaut.
It is. But let's switch our attention because we did just touch on the first matchup tonight, Forge versus Laval, but we have another one as well, same time at 7, and it is Montreal versus Vaughan Azzurri. And we have a question already regarding that. And I see a few in there, but see if Montreal need to win the Canadian Championship as there is the only way into the Champions League after their poor start to the MLS. And playoffs already look unlikely. And I remember having Amy on as well to talk about the preview this season for CF Montreal. And despite a lot of like big name players leaving CF Montreal, there was still a lot of, I don't know, hope that some of these young players can kind of step up, like a Sean Rea, Saliba as well, Jonathan Sirwa in goal. I mean, I'm just naming a few. That the team is littered with a ton of talented young Canadian players, but this season has not gone according to plan. They just lost again to DC. DC. Yeah, they just played DC. It's Wayne Rooney's side over the weekend.
Yeah, at home too.
At home, and I watched that. I watched that game alongside with the TFC one, and it was a very disappointing result. So, Alex, what do you want to see from CF Montreal as they look to maybe kickstart their season a little bit? I mean, they're going to be heavy favorites. Is there any players that you're expecting to potentially stand out? And what will happen if they don't manage to win? Is a change of managers on the cards? Where do they go from there?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, let's recognize that Vaughan, great team. Super excited to see them play. This is a tough draw. Not only are they away, but to face Montreal, we saw League One teams push CPL, but even then you could feel not a gulf of quality, but certainly CPL teams have the edge. Well, as we know, the MLS, it's going to be, it's different. Semi-pro versus players like on MLS, like you guys like Victor Wanyama, like guys on, Victor Wanyama up against some of these League One Ontario players. It's just a different ball game altogether. Because of that, if Montreal somehow loses, I think it's something where you look at coaching. A coaching change could be in order. It's certainly something would be shook up there, just given the stage of this sort of thing. But for Montreal, this is a game where all the pressure's on them and they have to relish that. And I think just build some confidence, especially for youngsters, because I think some of their youngsters have been thrown in the deep end and it's been a bit unfair to them because someone like Nathan Saliba, very exciting prospect. He's shown good flashes. He's basically been asked to go out and be Ismail Kone, which is just not fair because Ismail Kone, is a once in a lifetime kind of player based on the way he burst on the scene. And you look across the board, Sean Rea is asked to be Georgi Mihailovic, like for like. That's a big ask. In a competition like this, it's fair for them to go out against League One Ontario players and dominate. I think it's something where they should go out. I mean, Saliba and the U23 Montreal players, they'd gone up against that PLSQ level. Reyes dominated the CPL. They should go out and really get confidence for those younger players who maybe haven't had that chance to hit the ground running in MLS, and then use this to maybe get a bit of confidence. So I'm looking at the young Canadian players in particular, Rea, Saliba, maybe some of these other ones who could slip in. I don't know, maybe a Jules Anthony Vilsain, if he's healthy, can slip in and just really use this as a game to get confidence.
Now, I remember when I was talking again in that preview at the start of the year with Amy, and she said like there was a lot of question marks around the CF Montreal side because of the talent that was leaving and the pressure. But I mean, a lot of fans out there who follow CPL know how good a Sean Rea can be, and it was just whether they can do it with a new manager, somewhat of a new system, new players, and so far hasn't been very good, which led to a big trade. And I just wanted to get your opinion, Alex. I don't know if I talk to Alex pretty much every day, and I don't think I've actually talked to him too much. So let us know down in the comments as well, guys, and we'll get into some more questions, just what you thought of the Kamal Miller trade. But last turn, Duke obviously joining up with CF Montreal. I don't know if you have a lot to speak on them. I watched I watched the game. I thought Duke looks like a bright spot, but just giving up someone like Kamal Miller to Inter Miami, just kind of like a red flag saying that your season maybe isn't going the right way and they're already looking to shake things up. What did you make of that trade?
Yeah, I mean, it was a bit of a desperation move from Montreal. I think it was something where they needed to make a move, and it made sense to move on from Miller because they'd been shopping him since the beginning of the season, so they kind of knew what the market was. And I'm just surprised that's where they felt the market was for Miller plus money. It feels like they gave up the two most valuable assets, 1.3 million in jam. Like, just for context, they paid 1 million in jam for Alistair Johnson. So like, it's not, that's a lot of jam to give up. And then they gave up Kamal Miller, national team player. Bryce Duke, I'm very excited about. He's someone I've seen a few times in Miami. I see, okay, maybe there's been a player there, obviously, as well. I saw him play for Valour FC back in the day. So I'm high on him. I think that's a good pickup, one that's going to help Montreal. But it just feels like maybe Miller for Duke. Money for Duke straight up would have made a lot more sense. Lassiter's just kind of feels like a body thrown in to make the numbers work, to add just some depth to the attack. So it's one where they definitely overpaid, no doubts, but it's one where they felt that they needed to make a move. And, to be fair with a guy like Miller, contract is up after this year. Of course, there's an option for that. He's made it clear he wants to go to Europe. It's an asset where maybe even if they didn't trade him for as much as we thought he was worth, also due to those factors, there's also reality that maybe he wasn't worth to other teams, at least around MLS, as much as we thought he was. So I get why, but it's also one where it felt like they could have maybe been a bit more patient. Certainly it feels like they're selling low, but it's something when you're struggling, you do whatever you can. Yeah,
I mean, I have read a few articles on Duke, and he seems like a very highly rated youngster that some CF Montreal supporters are pretty excited about, but the majority consensus is that, then I just put a few comments on the screen as well, is that Montreal were robbed. And I mean, I tend to think that way as well. But I mean, the start of the season has been disastrous. So they're looking for that spark. They felt like they had to make it. It's going to be interesting to see where this season is going to go, because like you guys have pointed out as well in the chat, this is CF Montreal's only chance. And that's going to lead to the next question. And I want to find it because it was a good one. But let us know quickly, guys, in the comment section, who do you think will win this year's edition of the Canadian Championship? And I will try to find, because I saw a couple good questions here.
It goes a bit up.
Oh, here's a good one as well. We'll get this until I find the other one. But considering the struggles of the MLS teams this season, is this the most open Voyageurs Cup we've seen? What do you think, Alex?
I think yes. I think it's something where it feels like if this is a year where we get something new, like say in the final of first ever MLS versus CPL final that's in a bracket situation. I'm just pointing that out because, of course, Forge played TFC in a final, but that was, guaranteed to happen. It was that COVID year. They're like, Island Games winner plays, MLS Canadian bubble winner. This would be the first time it would happen in a bracket setting, and it does feel like there's certainly a chance for that to happen. At the same time, I do think, the Whitecaps, they're in a kind of a peak situation right now in their life cycle. I think don't let the Champions League, results fool where they're at in their life cycle. And because of that, I wouldn't say, they're openly struggling. But certainly on the Toronto and Montreal side, it feels like things could be wide open, although TFC does also have the advantage of having Insigne and Bernadeschi. And it just feels like in a cup situation against, CPL teams, against League One teams, that could just give them a bit of an edge, knowing that you have those sorts of players to get you through. So on one hand, it's open in terms of, you look on paper, the CPL teams are improving a lot, but also Toronto and Vancouver, don't be fooled maybe by a bit of what we've seen, just because they have both form in the case of the Whitecaps, hidden form at least, and then TFC just talent.
Yeah, and I found the question, and a couple people even said, "Good question, John." So I had to get it up here, but do let us know in the chat what you think about this question as well. I have seen a few answers I'll go through, but which MLS team has or needs to win the Voyageurs Cup? Montreal for the pressure, Vancouver to repeat, or TFC because of the budget, I guess. Where do you think I would say pressure is probably for all three, and I mean
different ways.
Yeah, different ways. I saw Montreal for the pressure, but I think pressure in all different ways. But I'm gonna reword it a little bit. Who do you think has the most pressure of the three MLS teams to win?
Now that's a good question, and also just shout out to John because of course he's our region's CONCACAF expert. So it's a pleasure to see John lingering around in the chat for this one. Always love reading his get CONCACAF stuff. So always someone to check out if you want to learn more just about everything in CONCACAF. But in terms of this game, it feels like it's Toronto. It's something where, look, Montreal, they historically love this competition. They want to get back to Champions League, but you just look at everything going on and there's just so much turmoil. Yeah, there's that pressure, but it feels like if they lose, it's like another drop in the bucket. It just more adds to their problems. As for Vancouver, it's something where there's a lot of pressure because they're at their life cycle. But also they have a history. They've struggled historically in this competition, whereas TFC, they've won a lot of this competition. They have the competition's best players, Insigne and Bernadeschi. The fact that, they lost last year in the final with both of them playing, albeit some of their first games as a club. Just because of that and the pressure of the club, it feels like if TFC loses, that's going to be a ginormous deal. So I think it's something that, TFC does have the most pressure just purely based on the star output they have, the fact that they're a big club team. They're a club that's won MLS Cup, that's gone to Champions League final. For them, tournaments like this, they should be breezing through. So the fact that they lost to the Whitecaps last year hurt a lot. So, of course, lots of pressure on Vancouver and Montreal. But if we're talking the most pressure, I think it has to be Toronto by a good amount.
I would say that too. And I like a lot of the points you said. But for me, it just goes back to the fact, like you said, TFC, they outspend the other two. That already puts pressure on. They had a horrible campaign in every sense of the word last season. And this season, they're sitting in 9th. So, they're sitting in the last playoff spot that just was extended, but they have a 1-6-1 record. And again, with a team that has brought in a lot of players that are trying to mold this team, brought in Bob Bradley, you just expect more. And on top of that, Alex, I don't know if you obviously remember back to that final, which I'm assuming you do, between the Whitecaps and TFC, but TFC, to me, were horrible. They did not deserve to win, and it's why the Whitecaps ended up in the end taking it. But even with those big star players, they couldn't get that boost that they truly needed. They have a little bit more time to settle in under Bob Bradley, so I just feel like there's so much pressure this season on TFC to deliver. As for CF Montreal, there's no evidence so far this season to show that they're going to go on a cup run, but that is the beautiful thing of a cup run. Things can happen, but right now, and I saw another question we're going to go to after about upsets, but that CF Montreal Vaughan match could be something for the ages. And for the Whitecaps, they're expected probably to go to the finals as well. They had a great tournament last year, good campaign. I've already played a ton of football at the start of this season, so we will have to wait and see. But I'm just going to throw a little love in here to Atletico Ottawa, who says we want to play an MLS team. So,
and I'd like to see that.
I'd like to see it as well. So it's going to be I would really like to see that if you guys are able to get through Halifax, take that Forge match. I think that would be a juicy quarterfinal.
All I'm saying is Ottawa and Montreal are very close to each other. I know a lot of Montreal fans are also Ottawa fans. A Montreal-Ottawa game would be fascinating because I imagine there'd be some pretty good away support from Ottawa because, of course, in this case, Montreal would host. So could be good little matchup.
No, I didn't want to get to this one too early because we are supposed to go through every single matchup, but without any explanation, Alex, no explanation, because we will get to every single one. But I do like this question. I didn't want to lose it in the chat. Look, the only real question is, are we getting a cup set in round 1? What do you think? You can say yes or no, or if you want to get specific, you can tell me which one.
Let's go yes, and let's go TSS Rovers versus Valour. That's what I've highlighted for a multitude of reasons.
The top of the CPL power rankings. He's going against them. You know what? I don't know if I want to be bold here or not. Well, let's see. Cup set. Like for example, I could see Laval. Sorry, I'm torn.
I know it's tough one, isn't it?
Okay, I could see Vaughan upsetting Montreal before I could seeing Laval upset Forge. Is that fair? Is that like a fair statement, you think, or no?
I think it's one where that's a bit out there, just again because Montreal's been struggling, but again the gulf between MLS and League One again. Yeah, I've seen Montreal, the injuries worth noting, but it's just worth noting that especially on the road, like if it was Vaughan at home, it's a whole different story, and that's why I've picked the Rovers just as one that could be a cup set. Valour looked great this weekend, so certainly my optimism in that regard has dipped a bit because Valour looked fantastic. But there's a few factors playing in Rovers' favor. First of all, they're going to have a great crowd. It sounds like there's going to be a couple thousand packing Swangard. That's going to be huge. The fact that Rovers play on grass, and they play on a bit of a different grass. Like it's a bit of a longer grass. So maybe like a team like Valour, who plays on turf. They played on turf this past weekend. A lot of their preseason games were on turf. That's going to be a bit of a different, just something to get used to, the way the ball moves. The Rovers have a lot of guys who are familiar with it. The Rovers also do have a good amount of ex-CPL experience, which helps just because, that gulf between League One and CPL isn't as big as League One and MLS. Like there's a lot of factors that make sense. Whereas, Vaughan, Montreal on the road, the gulf between the two leagues, etc. Even Laval Forge, just the fact that they're going to be on the road is just going to give them that disadvantage. Whereas for Rovers, a lot of the boxes are ticked where, don't get me wrong, they're still the underdogs, but there just seems to be more factors that could be in their favor for potential upset. And it feels like we're due kind of a cup set. There weren't really many last year. Last year's bracket was so straightforward, whereas the year before you had Whitecaps, Pacific. It feels like we're due another result of that sort of magnitude.
Yeah, and just trying to go a little bit different because everything Alex says does make sense. But if I'm going for the fun answer to say that there is going to be a cup set, truthfully, I am looking at that Vaughan CF Montreal matchup just because of the start to the season for CF Montreal. After what was such a successful, they were personally one of my favorite Canadian clubs to watch just in general last season because with Kone, Johnston, they were just so much fun. Those players got big moves away. You still thought there's a lot of talent there to kind of maybe rediscover some type of form, but this season has gone really differently. And right now, after the start to their season, this could be the icing on the cake that, if something bad happens early on in this match, that they could panic, they could get upset. I mean, maybe I'm not wrong, and obviously Montreal could go out and win 3-0, but, for a fun answer, and Alex taking the Rovers, I will take Vaughan. I'll back. I see some Vaughan fans in the chat, so why not have some fun? But that's what cups are all about. But I truthfully believe if CF Montreal lose tonight, then something's going to happen. They've already made a red flag kind of early trade where, they got ridiculed for it, but anyways, we will go on to another question here before we get on to the next matchup, Alex. So get ready for it. But I do want to ask this question, and for anyone in the chat as well. So this one does say Vancouver will win breakout tournament for Ryan Raposo. So I'm going to twist that question a little bit. Who do you think could be in for a breakout tournament? Do you like Ryan Raposo? Is there someone else in one of the other clubs that could be there for a big tournament? Let us know, guys, in the chat if you have a player in mind that you think, all right, Canadian Championship 2023 is this guy's time.
I mean, Ryan Raposo is a bit of a weird shout in a sense. He won the Young Player of the Tournament last year, so it's like, can we call it a breakout if he goes off again this year? But I mean, it's a good shout. I think he certainly showed that he loves the competition. But in terms of young players, just to throw some across the board, I think Sean Young for Pacific. I think it's something where you just look at that draw. If Pacific can get a couple early games, maybe go to a semifinal, and Sean Young plays well in all of them, goes up against the Whitecaps. I like the potential for that show. Maybe, you look at the Whitecaps, they're going to need to play Canadians, and Canadians, they haven't always done that in MLS play. So maybe this is a chance for Thomas Hasal to go on a run, just because I think he's probably going to get a good run of games here. So say Thomas Hasal can potentially break out for the Whitecaps. You're looking at Montreal. I'd love to see Nathan Saliba break out in this sort of tournament. I mean, in particular, Sean Ray as well can get a shout there, but I think Saliba would be great just for that midfield profile, because I already kind of know what Ray is about, but if Saliba can really burst on the scene, that'd be good. In terms of Toronto FC, Jaquil Marshall-Rudy, just let him run in this competition and let him go off. Forge, throw out Kwasi Poku. The Wanderers, take your pick. Maybe Christian Campagna. He didn't start the last game, so not sure if he'll be healthy for this one, but I'd love to see a Campagna pop off, or even a guy like Thiago Coimbra, who looked decent as a little flash off the bench for the Wanderers. John O'Neill SC with Ottawa. Just there's some intriguing young players across the board, and hopefully some of those guys, especially those who maybe will get a chance to play a few games before having to play MLS opposition, can pop off and make a name for themselves.
Yeah, I like those picks too. Noah Jensen, I like that as well, man. I like that. I was going to say DeAndre Kerr, just, again, giving an opportunity, maybe finding a good run of form, finding the back of the net. Not that this would be a breakout, but Akinola, maybe, just to rediscover a little bit of form, gets a start up front. Maybe he can find the back of the net, get his confidence going again after what was, a decent camp with the Canadian men's national team. But let's get on to our next one, because we've taken a while here. Next one is Halifax Wanderers versus Atletico Ottawa. We have touched on it a little bit. We have Atletico Ottawa somewhere here in the chat, just, it's very confident saying that they're going to win it. What do you like about this matchup, Alex? I know that obviously the two clubs just played one another. How much do you think that they gave away in that first match? This will be on a neutral site. I don't know if you want to, just in case no one else out there knows about that, which obviously can, make things a little bit different. But what are your thoughts on this matchup?
Yeah, this one should be good just because we saw it in the weekend. They matched up very nicely. Halifax team that wants to hold on the ball. be fluid in possession, really go at teams on the ball, whereas Ottawa was comfortable sitting a little deeper than bursting in transition. So it's kind of going to be like, how does that matchup evolve? What did they take from what they learned? Do they tweak? Do they capitalize on little errors? I think for Halifax, for example, they'll just want to be a little more patient on the ball. When they break those lines, go at it. But also when the lines aren't there, just continue to work. And they did a good job of that, to be fair. But it just felt like they lacked that final moment in the final third after some great buildup. They just missed that final pass. And as for Ottawa, I just want to see Halifax plays a very interesting style of play. Like Riley Ferrazzo was playing right back in off the ball, but then in possession, he'd cut inside and would be playing center mid, left center mid, right center mid. What that meant was when they lost the ball, he had a lot of running to do to get back to his right back position. There was some space there. Good. Ottawa wasn't really able to capitalize on that because John and Neil SC, their biggest speed and outlet on that game was on the right. Gianni Dos Santos was on the left, but he was cutting inside. Maybe they put Assi on the left and tell him, okay, when Ferrazzo gets caught out of position, run in that space. Like I want to see little matchups like that from Ottawa to try to capitalize on the space. And then for Halifax, I just want to see them be patient. So I kind of love that they've already played each other because now it's like the second round of a boxing match. You kind of saw what each team was about. So it's like, can you actually capitalize on this weaknesses? Did Halifax completely surprise and play a 4-4-2, sit deep and make Halifax or Ottawa attack them? Do Ottawa try to hold more of the ball? There's a lot of intrigue to how this matchup will go.
And I still feel like, one of those big underlying storylines is Sam Salter. Like this is the first historical transfer that taken place, and seeing what happened with Atletico Ottawa last year and kind of the way that those two strikers can play off one another. And I like what you talked about with Gianni Dos Santos kind of coming in there and taking the tabula role. I want to see how that partnership could potentially grow because we know what Sam Salter can do. He can be a deadly finisher, but I think, like you mentioned, Gianni Dos Santos could be in for a big season. Change of scenery, maybe a little bit more freedom, a little bit more fun to his game. We know he can score some bangers. I don't know. What do you think about that potential partnership maybe taking off when they take on Halifax?
Yeah, and if I'm them, I would kind of want to see a 4-4-2 in this game because, last game they went more one striker and just didn't work for them. But Malcolm Shaw looked really good when he came on. Maybe play Salter and Shaw off each other just to see what that looks like. Throw Assi and Dos Santos on the wings and then go Bassett Verhoeven in the middle. Yeah. I think that would be interesting to see because I like the idea of playing with more of a 10. They tried Gabriel Antonoro. Obviously, that was huge just in terms of U21 minutes, which we know is a big subject in Ottawa. And then they went Bahus in the second half. And Bahus is someone I like a lot as a player. So obviously dropping him wouldn't be an easy choice. But I think against the way Halifax plays, if you can play that 4-4-2, sit back, absorb space, and then have the two strikers to play off of in transition to open up the speed of Dos Santos and Assi, could be a little, system that could work for this game and maybe get a chance to get both of your strikers on the field at the same time.
I feel like they would create chances that way. That seems like a very offensive heavy type of a lineup when you get the wingers up there, the two strikers. I like it. I think that it would maybe lead to a little bit more of an open matchup, which I mean, in a cup tie, what more do you want to see? So I would really like to see that as well. I'm curious to see where they end up going. But Atletico Ottawa, like I said, they were in here in the chat. I don't know if they're still with us, but they seem pretty confident as well. But we move on to our next matchup, which we talked about the overachievers, I think, of match day one, which we'll get to, which is Valour, but the underachievers for me. And I will put my hand up and say, wow, that was a tough start because I was very confident, very excited to watch York United play this season. I love the chemistry they were building to the tail end of last season. I love the recruitments that they had. And then they went out there and they threw up a stinker. And I was very surprised with a lot of the tactics that went into play there. The fact that Dero didn't even start, especially after the chemistry that he had with Babuli. But we got York United versus Vancouver FC. Vancouver FC's first ever match in the Canadian Championship. Alex, what do you think about this? I know who impressed you a little bit more, as I know you did like Vancouver FC's matchup. You just thought at times they could have played with a little bit more confidence. So what do you think about this matchup? And could Vancouver FC win their very first ever Canadian Championship match?
Yeah, it's going to be a fascinating one. I mean, York getting the benefit of hosting it, but, it will be something definitely to see. I thought York, they just didn't look tactically right. And it just feels like they didn't set themselves up in the best way, just looking at their roster. I mean, first of all, they asked a lot of some new guys. 3 of their 4 players on the back line were new, in Sumaro, Faye, Grant. To be fair, I thought Grant looked solid despite the own goal. He was someone where he kind of led well, and you could say, okay, that's why they kind of wanted him from Forge, that experience. But you could just tell overall there was maybe a bit of disconnect between that back four. And then in midfield, it felt like Faye looks like a great player, but he looks like someone who's more of a 10 than an 8. It felt it at times, especially in a double pivot where it left Gagnon Lapare isolated. Then you look up on the wings. Wojciechowski, hopefully I can pronounce that right. I mean, it was a bit of a mouthful of a name, but even he looked like it was a big, bit of a step up to ask him to go and start right away in that left wing role, and he struggled at times. And I think it's telling that when York made some of those subs to bring in Di Rosario, Austin Ricci, Baldissimo, Bahia, some of those guys with more pro experience, they really started to wake up and get a lot more going. So I think that's something for York. They just need to lean into some of that experience and just build off of that and put their guys in the right position. Vancouver, though, can definitely catch them in that because York struggled against Valour's organization. Vancouver's going to be organized. They had to go up against a good Pacific team and really gave them a good run for most of the match. So if they can be organized, they can be disciplined. Most importantly, they can be more confident on the ball because when they played for 20 minutes in that second half, Vancouver looked like they could make something of that game. And if they can capitalize on something like that against a York team that looked a bit disorganized in week one, for sure they can get a win. For sure they can at least get their first goal and push York to the brink. So I think this is one where Vancouver has to be very happy with this matchup on a lot of fronts.
Now, one of the things I found very intriguing, and I want to get your opinion on it, because one of the most important players for me for Vancouver FC this season will be Caden Chung. What did you think about him kind of drifting into the midfield? Did you like that? Would you rather have seen him play as a right wing back, right back? Do you like him kind of shifting into that midfield? What were your thoughts on that? Because I thought that was an intriguing move.
He looked comfortable in the midfield. I thought he was doing well to spread the ball around, and he certainly understood the defensive assignments. And I thought he, especially in the second half, he grew in the game on the ball. So yeah, I don't mind that experiment continuing. If anything, I'm curious to see what Vancouver do at right back because, I mean, they put Ibrahim Bakare there and he looked solid, but he's a center back and they did kind of lack some of that threat that more of a natural wide player could have brought there. And of course, you look at Chung and that's an easy answer, but I also liked what he brought in the midfield and I wouldn't mind seeing him develop and continue there. I mean, Afshin Gotby mentioned after the game that he feels like it's a position where he has a higher ceiling long term, and if that's Chung's first game in midfield, I'd be inclined to agree. So long may that experiment continue, although that just means Vancouver's going to have to maybe find some different options at right back if they want a little more penetration, a little more offensive threat. Yeah,
no, I don't want to. I'm not making these type of comparisons, but I'm saying sometimes it's not unrealistic to see a right back moving to the middle. You've seen it twice with two already Bayern legends, Philip Lahm going from right back to CDM, as well as Joshua Kimmich, who started as a right back. So there's been a little tendency throughout world football where you've seen right backs step into that midfield. And I think Caden Chung, like you said, did an excellent job. I think he's got very good awareness of the ball. I think he looked very comfortable. I was a little surprised to see him there. I was kind of expecting him to feature kind of like a wing back, and I thought he did a great job stepping inward. But we're going to talk about storylines here for a sec, bouncing off of Vancouver FC. Because if Vancouver FC win, which again, looking at match day number 1 and Alex's power rankings, they might be favorites too, but they would have a date with the Vancouver Whitecaps. What do you think that would mean just for a storyline of this tournament? How fun would it be already to have a Vancouver FC matchup against the Vancouver Whitecaps?
Yeah, that would mean a lot in a lot of levels. I think firstly, there's the fact that there's a few ex-Vancouver Whitecaps fans in the Vancouver ranks. Certainly, a lot of the Fraser, the Fraser Valley Fanatics, as the Vancouver FC supporters group is known. A good chunk of them used to be Vancouver Whitecaps supporters for the Curva Collective back in the day. This is for all people from Vancouver will recognize all these names. So that's certainly something where there's that maybe a bit of, we're going up against our former team. We're going to cheer a little louder. It's going to mean a little more. And I think there's a lot of fans who have already made that jump, who are on that fence in a game like this. Vancouver can go out and surprise the Whitecaps. Maybe that can, turn a few people over. And just, there's, of course, the battle for the city. I mean, the Whitecaps already losing to Pacific. This is funny, actually. James Merriman kind of went under the radar during the game on Saturday after the game against Vancouver. He joked that, I guess, after beating both Vancouver teams, that BC is purple for now. safe to say there's a bit of BC bragging rights going on across the board. So the Whitecaps certainly won't want to lose to another BC-based CPL team because of the ramifications that they're still hearing BC is purple 2 years after the Ferryside Derby loss. So there's a lot of just cultural and geographical things going on off the field and anything on the field. Of course, anytime a CPL team would host, because it sounds like Vancouver would host this in their brand new stadium, just their second ever game at their new stadium. It's always going to be special on the field for that reason and with the crowd.
And that's the beautiful thing about this competition and just cup ties in general. They create incredible storylines. And I mean, I was the one who was talking up York United this season. I hope they can find their way. But in terms of this cup competition, what a storyline it would be for get the BC bragging rights up on the line. So it's definitely one to watch for. But Alex, now it's time to move on to a matchup I know you're excited for. TSS Rovers versus Valour. Those are your favorite, your power ranking number 1, Valour FC. And I'm very intrigued to talk about this a little bit. I've seen a lot of comments about Valour. So guys, if I missed a lot of them, you guys have been awesome today. And if you're still with us in the chat, be sure to drop a like. And let us know if you have any thoughts on Valour as well. I'm going to try to find the chat, but you guys have been crushing it today. But Valour for sure was the biggest impression on me after match day number 1. I thought after a team that was, I guess you could say, gutted, but kind of shaped into Dos Santos's side, looked exactly like that. Absolutely loved it. Anthony Novak scoring, which was just a great story for me. Nyongabert looked incredible. I think he could be a big player this season, but they're taking on the Rovers, who Alex, you just spent a little bit of time with. So I know you're excited about this matchup, and tell me a little bit maybe why you think, actually, no, I want you to focus a little bit more on Valour first, and then you can go to the Rovers. I know you're excited about the Rovers, but tell me why this could be a good momentum boost for Valour, who just had a great start to their season on the road and can maybe push that a little bit further now.
Yeah, I mean, this is something where Valour is going to be very excited after, winning the first game as they did, because they looked good. Like it's not just them, going out and having a decent performance and then scraping a road win. Like they took the game to York, and really the only reason the shots in the XG were close because York were down 2-0, and like Martin Nash said after the game, then they started playing and putting the game to Valour. Valour for 80 minutes was just untouchable, and that's you just look at the way they played in midfield, that midfield trio. They got the speed down the wings. They're organized defensively. They did all this without Andrew Jean-Baptiste, which is wild because Valour's never really ever looked good without Andrew Jean-Baptiste. All of a sudden, they've built up some depth at the center back position. I think it's something where this is a huge confidence builder for Valour. Last year, they got a bit of a, the stiff end of the draw, so to speak. They drew Whitecaps away in the preliminary match because, of course, the Whitecaps had dropped in based on past poor performances in the Canadian Championship. They lost it was 2-0. Valour played well, but it was one where they're never really in the game. Now they get a chance to go up against a Rovers side that is confident for many reasons. We'll go into that, but it's also a team playing its first game of the year. It's a semi-pro team. It's one where Valour will look at this, like, look, get the win, move on to another CPL team in the next round and try to get a bit of momentum. And hey, they play a style built for cup soccer. I always say that teams that defend well will do well in cup competitions, and among teams in the CPL, Valour has a very good defense.
Yeah, and I just this comment cracked me up. Saw the lads last night and tried to send them some spiked Shirley Temples to get them off. But no, it's an incredible story. It really is. And I'm gonna be the first one to put my hand up and say, because I'm actually afraid to see what because Armin texted us and wanted us to send in our predictions for the CPL this year. I know I wasn't excited about Valour. I said it maybe behind closed doors a lot to Alex, just in terms of the turnover of the side. And I just didn't know where they would be. Alex, you were a little bit more positive than I was, just in terms of, you're like, this is an identity for Dos Santos. This is the kind of side that he wants. He can do damage. He can play his kind of football. And we saw that. We saw that in the first match, and now I'm afraid to look where I put them because I feel like it was 6th or 7th, and that's not great. But they look like a statement, and I'm really excited to see what they can do this season. And I know that I've seen a lot of Valour fans being very vocal on Twitter about, some of the disappointments with the club, but this is as good of a start as you would have wanted. This could be a lot of fun to maybe build on that first start and that first win against York, and then go into a cup competition like this and do something pretty special. But now we'll switch quickly over. You touched on them a little bit before we move on to the Rovers, because I know that you're excited to talk about them. What do you think they have to do right to break down this very stubborn backline for Valour?
Yeah, I mean, it's just going to be about really getting past the midfield. That's the bigger question. So I think Valour, what helped them a lot and what was scary was that they looked good in midfield, because even when Valour was at their best last year, it was very north-south. It was very defend well, get the ball directly to the forwards. The midfielders are kind of just there to run around and fill space, whereas this new trio sort of Diego Gutierrez, Raf Oheen, and Dante Campbell, they were playing. They were going east-west with the ball. They were being patient. They were tackling. Campbell had a fantastic game defensively. Oheen as well. He's nicknamed the Rhino for a reason. He loves to get stuck in and involved in that. So I think for Rovers, it was just about getting past that midfield, because I think York was almost a bit surprised. Maybe that's why they went with the setup that they did with Phi in more of a double pivot. They're like, oh, we can get away with playing a more offensive player deeper on the field. Let's get that possession in midfield. And Valour's like, okay, we're fine with that. Let's control the game physically. So I think the Rovers are going to see that and be like, okay, we have to be good in midfield if we want to get our attackers unlocked, because the Rovers have some good attackers. I mean, we can dive into that in a bit. They have some guys who've scored at different levels and can get things going. So if Rovers can get past that midfield and get them the ball, certainly there's a few guys in that Rovers attack that I'd back finishing their chances if the ball were to fall to them.
All right, Alex, now I'm going to ask you a question before we move on to the last one. What do you think is the matchup of round one? Because we haven't touched them yet, but I'm looking at the Cavalry and Pacific matchup. The Cavs, after an impressive start against Forge, and I thought Pacific looked pretty good as well. I'm just looking, I don't know, do you think there's a closer matchup? Maybe the Atletico Halifax game? I don't know. Is this the matchup of round one?
I'd say in terms of pure just skill level and output and just, what's at stake, I think Pacific Cavalry is the most evenly matched best game. And then I think in terms of storylines, it has to be Rovers Valour. So those two teams, it's fitting that the winner of each game will play each other in the next round, because it's kind of how it's stacked up.
And like you said, if a CPL club is to go on and potentially make it to a final, this is the path that you want to have. So you said probably the winner of this Pacific and Cavalry matchup has that. So tell me a little bit about the matchup. What are you excited for to see? And who do you think potentially has the better chance between the two to make that deep run?
Yeah, I mean, certainly I just give the edge to Pacific in this one based on the last time these two teams met in 2021, the Canadian Championship, Pacific won. So I have that in my mind. Of course, a lot's changed since then, but Pacific at home, they're always a very good team at home, one of the best in the CPL at home over the last 2 years. Cavalry at the same time, though, it's tough because they looked good on the road against Forge, and really it felt like they played a good enough game that if it was anyone but Forge, they're heading away with 3 points. Okay, Cavalry is watch out. It feels like their game almost fell under the radar because they drew Forge, and it was just like, another Forge Cavalry draw. It was something where I watched it, and it was good performance from Cavalry. So I think Pacific is just going to have that slight edge because they're going to have been at home all week. Their first game was at home. This game is at home. They've got a deep, group of players they didn't even tap into, whereas Cavalry did have to travel to Forge. They suffered some knocks in that first game. Someone like Charlie Trafford looked like he picked up a knock. You'd hope he's back healthy. And that travel, it's going to make it a bit tougher on Cavalry, but I think these two teams match up well. Pacific's going to want to hold the ball, dominate the middle, but Cavalry is so flexible that I'm excited to see how they view the best way to neutralize Pacific, because I just love the way Cavalry operates tactically, which is you don't know what you're going to get from them game to game, and it makes it so hard to plan for them because they're so versatile.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see it, and I think you're right. I mean, just look at this pathway to the final. This could be something big, and what matchup it would be, because like we said, this could be the matchup of round one, and then if it is Valour and if not it's Rovers, there's still could be some storylines there. Imagine Pacific Rovers quarterfinal, Valour there as well. I mean, imagine that. Look at that, Alex. Rovers versus Pacific, Vancouver FC versus Vancouver Whitecaps.
Yeah, and all BC. That would be the battle for BC.
I was gonna say something's there.
But it would take a lot to happen. But if those 4 BC teams end up in the same pot, let's just say there's going to be a lot of bragging rights at stake over those few weeks.
No, but I'm definitely excited for that one. But let's, guys, get into I think probably the last big topic we're going to do, and that is dark horse of the tournament. Now, we kind of touched on it, but I want to hear what you guys have to say. So let me know down in the comment section, who do you think will be the dark horse of this tournament and why? I don't know, Alex, when you're looking at this, is someone... I mean, I'm going to say for dark horses, the MLS clubs don't count. I'm assuming maybe everyone else is fair game for a dark horse. I don't know what your thoughts are around the rules of this dark horse question I just asked, but
I find it hard to call Forge a dark horse.
Yeah.
So I'd stay away from Forge. for me, it comes down to two, and I don't know what you think. I think it's Valour, and I think it's Ottawa. I think just based on the styles they play, the bracket they have, and just everything about them, I feel like they're a team that could just grind. It feels like dark horses in these sorts of cup runs. They just find a way to grind through. And I don't know. I look at Valour, I look at Ottawa, the way they play, the way they're coached, the spirit around those teams. Like they're teams that I could see just go out and frustrating, an MLS side with how they play. So I'll certainly go Valour just based on how open that west side of the draw is, but also I'd throw Ottawa in the ring there.
Yeah, I'm going to say something about Valour very quickly that, I was thinking of. But yeah, I've seen a lot of, I think the consensus so far is that Valour are the dark horses. I think that's a fair, I think that's definitely fair. I think Duncan's comments is funny. Vaughn, simply because they could give Montreal trouble and easily get a coach fired, which is true. But I just want to throw it back because when you talk about defensive-minded football, and when you look just maybe at one of the biggest competitions in the world, you look at the Champions League, look at a team who kind of, you can make some parallels to Valour. Maybe Valour doesn't have the biggest budget in the league. Definitely not the biggest budget in the tournament. You could probably argue over the years, especially like in 2014 when Atletico Madrid went to the final, they didn't have the biggest budget. They didn't have the most talented players. They played in a very difficult way to break down. They were ruthless on the counter. They had some key players as well. And I think that's where I was at the beginning of the year when I was looking at Valour. That's kind of what I overlooked. I was just like, there's too much turnover. Can they really get these guys gelling in that defensive way? Because it's not easy to do. It's not easy playing under a Diego Simeone or those type of managers. And to see what Valour could do already, one match in, gives you a lot of confidence that maybe this could be a really, really hard team to play. And when you're in a gritty cup competition, like you said, Alex, defensive-minded football is so hard to break down. They make you stubborn. They make you nervous. And yeah, I mean, Valour really got my attention that opening match day. And maybe it's because I feel guilty that I ranked them so low in my predictions. But I mean, that was just a statement for me.
Yeah, I think it's something where in these single leg knockouts, defense helps. It's not saying that Valour or any of these teams are going to go out and park the bus. I don't think that's the way Valour plays. They're a team that is, despite being defensively strong, they still want to be aggressive. But what's nice that it across 90 minutes, if you can be defensively solid, you get your penalties. Well, there you go. That's why I threw Ottawa in there, Alan. So
no, that was the other one. That was the other one, clearly.
But yeah, I think it's something, especially in these 90-minute ties, 180 minutes, you can't sit back. You just can't. You're going to get broken down eventually. But in a 90-minute, if you're defensively solid, at the very least, your ceiling's or your floor is always going to be penalties. If you can nab a goal or two at the other end, it just always helps to be so defensively solid because, look, it's fun to get in these 4-3, 5-4 games, but in these single knockout matches, it's a very risky game to play. So, yeah, I just look at teams like Valour and Ottawa, and I think they certainly have the mindset to tackle these sorts of one game at a time. Especially, it's almost fitting in a sense. Carlos Gonzalez last year, every week you'd ask him, like, this week's a cup final for us. This week's a cup final. Like, he just has this mentality of every game's a cup final. And of course, every coach is going to say that, but you can believe it the way Ottawa was playing last year. Every game was a cup final. And I think because of that and the way Valour played, those two could certainly scrape their way through.
Yeah, and that's funny. I said Atletico Madrid, but didn't mention Atletico Ottawa. But Atletico Ottawa, as we know, is a defensive-minded unit as well. I just threw Valour in there. But and yeah, in my parallel to Atletico Madrid, I wasn't so much talking in the last few years, but I was really thinking back to that 2014 run that they had. They those type of players. I believe they brought in David Villa for free. They didn't have the biggest budget in the world, especially compared to Madrid, Barca, Bayern, the Premier League sides. They just upset a ton of quality oppositions, and then we're one goal away because Ramos tied it in the 90th minute. So that was just that. I was more so talking about that Atletico Madrid story of 2014 because they did spend a ton of money after that, and that I think was also before Diego Simeone was one of the highest coaches. But that was the parallel I was kind of making. But anyways, another good pick here is Pacific, and like you mentioned, Alex, I mean the home games are going to be big, and I do think they have the quality for it. And I truthfully think that could be it, because yeah, it would be the Whitecaps in the semifinal. And again, we were talking about storylines. Imagine getting back to the semifinal, like you just talked about, purple. Another
fairy side. I think we're doing that. I'd take another fairy side derby in about a month's time, because it'd be late May. Yeah, sign me up for that.
Oh, that's funny. All right, now let's switch it to. We're talking about dark horses, potential biggest underachievers. And now I feel like we have to look at the top, maybe the Forge and the 3 MLS clubs. You can maybe throw in Pacific in there if you want. I feel like I'm going to focus on I don't know if this is a fun question or not. Because like if you look at Montreal, if they get knocked out in the first round, bang, they nailed it. That's the underachievers. But if they get past Vaughan, they still have TFC. One of those MLS giants will fall in the quarterfinals. So it sets probably one of those two up nicely to be the underachievers of the tournament. But right now, I mean, I'm not really expecting much out of Montreal. So I don't know. What do you think in terms of who may be the biggest underachiever of this tournament?
See, the thing is, for that one, I think Montreal's the easy choice. But just to play kind of almost devil's advocate in a sense on the other side, TFC could be one. And I say this because say Montreal wins and it's TFC Montreal, Montreal would be on the road for that, so that's obviously a bit of a disadvantage. But look at Toronto's form lately. Yeah, they've been getting results, but they're not winning. They're getting a lot of draws against other MLS teams, top MLS teams, not so good MLS teams. Say Montreal and Toronto go out. Toronto keeps up that form. Of course, a lot can happen the next 3 weeks. Say they get another draw. It's not like I'm predicting anything wild based on their last few games. Penalty shootouts are a lottery, and it's something where, well, not a lottery. That's unfair to say. Good teams at penalty shootouts could do well, but TFC lost penalties last year to Vancouver, so that'll be in the back of the mind. I'm just what I'd say is those scenarios could make it so that there's a reality where TFC maybe does end up falling to Montreal, even as wild as it might seem. Especially in 3 weeks, a lot can change. Maybe Montreal beats Vaughan and their season gets back on track. This is a bit of a throwback, but last year Montreal started the season a bit slow, and one of the games that helped them turn things around was they blew the doors off Forge at home 3-0, and then they really started to get their form in MLS play. Maybe there's something where they beat Vaughan, and as wild as it may seem, they just get their legs back, and then in 3 weeks, all of a sudden you're like, okay, this Montreal team is a bit more what we thought it would be. So because of that, I feel like that Montreal-Toronto game, Montreal's the easy team to look at now and be like, yeah, they'll fall. But there are some realities where TFC could also falter, and all of a sudden you're looking at them as a big underachiever.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, because we know an MLS team is going out in the quarterfinals. So, for example, if Montreal takes on TFC and Montreal loses, they're probably the favorites for the underachievers. But if something happens to the Whitecaps in that quarterfinal as well, I think they would take the cake there. I would say if the Whitecaps can't get past the quarterfinals, they'll probably be it. I thought this one was interesting as well. Cavalry or Pacific, whoever goes out in game one. It's difficult. It's
fair because both teams want to go all the way. And they've shown. Cavalry made the semis in 2019, and they have that. And Pacific did the same in 2021. These are teams that they underachieved a bit last year. I mean, Pacific lost to York in that that opening round. They were very frustrated about that, and it's a very good point.
This is also I clicked on the wrong one. I'll go back down, but this is a good point as well. Whitecaps have everything to lose. They have the bye already. They have arguably the easiest quarterfinal matchup, which I guess you could argue depending on who gets through in round one. And yeah, so it's difficult. It's gonna be fun though. But this is why these type of tournaments are so fun. But I did click on this one, so I'll read it quickly as well. Bold prediction: a CPL team wins it this year. Do you guys see this happening? Well, we kind of touched on it a little bit. We'll recap pretty quickly. Alex kind of talked about the route to the final. And if you take a look at the beautiful graphic we have here, Cavalry and Pacific will take on the winner of Valour and Rovers because of the quarterfinals. So they have a pretty decent matchup. And if Pacific keeps winning, and this was Alex's take, they will host pretty much all the way. So that's and I don't know. And tell us a little bit about the atmosphere too. At Starlight Stadium, because I just want everyone to know just how fun it is to go to some of these matches. I saw some incredible scenes, talked to a couple people who went there. So maybe talk about a little bit why that home field advantage could be pretty crucial if a CPL team does go all the way. Yeah,
well, I've had the privilege of being at, I guess, 3 of Pacific's biggest home games. You could argue this past weekend, I'd throw it up there amongst the most important home games that sold out. First ever Vancouver FC derby. Then I was there for their first CONCACAF League game at home. And then I was there for the Ferry Side Derby. And just what stands out is how loud it gets in there. It's something about these small, intimate stadiums. I still remember the Whitecaps game. It's been almost 2 years, and it's just ingrained in my mind, just the noise, how loud it was when that first Pacific goal hit. It was just the building came off. You could see the Whitecaps play whoa, this is very, unusual to see. And I think because of, for Pacific, if they can, go on a run and play the Whitecaps again. And I think it's something where if we're going to see a first ever CPL team to win, I see it happening at home for that CPL team. I just think that advantage of playing at home, you can capitalize on it. You'd imagine it's a good crowd. You're playing an MLS team. The MLS team can almost get nervous because there's that pressure. And I think a good example is last year when Forge hosted TFC in that 2020 Can Champ final. I think you saw that Forge was able to really take the game to TFC for large portions, and unfortunately their penalties weren't up to snuff. But I think that's a good example of why I think a Canadian CPL team, if they're going to win, it will be at home. So yeah, I'm looking at Valour, Pacific, Cavalry, York, Vancouver, any of those teams on that side of the bracket. If they can make a run of that final and host, then I'd certainly love their chances, especially teams like Pacific, Cavalry. They play in intimate stadiums. Like, it gets loud in there, it packs in, and that's a huge advantage.
Yeah, and this comment on the screen kind of just goes hand in hand with that. I think in terms of a dark horse, maybe in terms of a CPL club going on to winning it, Cavalry, Pacific, this could be a tournament for one of the two. So very exciting stuff. And then, and just in case anyone did hear, so Josh, we got any more vlogs coming? So so thanks for everyone for the support on the first vlog that I did for the Canada matchup. I was supposed to do a vlog for the Forge versus Cavalry match this past weekend. I had a issue. I have stomach issues. So yeah, weird excuse, but really ruined me the night before. It's happened part of my life for a while, so it's something I have to deal with. But I wouldn't have used that as an excuse to obviously get out of it. I have a very serious and bad stomach issues. So that's a fun fact about me. So that was the reason I wasn't able to do it. I was very disappointed. I was really excited to do that matchup, but there will be more vlogs to come. I'm already going to reschedule with Forge. We're going to find a matchup, and I have maybe a surprise as well that I need to run by the boss to make sure that's okay. But I'm going to, because I felt bad about not being able to do it. I have a special little idea in mind. So there's definitely going to be a vlog for a Forge match at some point. Got a couple supporters groups ideas as well. And then a Canadian Championship vlog is another interesting one. So the ideas will definitely keep coming. Maybe, a semifinal, depending on the type of matchup or something but there's definitely more vlogs to come for sure. That Forge one at some point, but anyways, so that is it. All good, Josh. Hope you're feeling better. I am feeling much better. Again, I've been dealing with these issues. I can't eat wheat or dairy, so in this case you understand why. So weird guy I am, and weird way to end off this stream, Alex. But I just wanted to make sure, because I was supposed to do it. I was very disappointed that I wasn't able to, but there will be more vlogs to come, and I'm excited to see what type of content Alex and I can do as well going forward in those type of videos, because they were a lot of fun. They were very well received from you guys. So that is all for today, guys. Really excited for the Canadian Championship to kick off tonight. Best of luck to your clubs, whoever you are supporting. Enjoy the Champions League as well, which kicks off in about 42 minutes. Alex, as always, man, it was a pleasure. This was a lot of fun. Hopefully we can do a lot more of these type of streams and stuff, because this was actually a lot of fun. You guys were crushing it throughout the chat as well. And there we go, guys. So drop a like on your way out. Drop a quick little prediction as well of who you think is going to win the tournament on the way out. And we will see you guys next time. Alex, any final words before we roll?
No, just get out to your local teams wherever you can. There's some tasty matchups, and hopefully you're able to get out to Forge tonight, or even Montreal or Burnaby tomorrow for the Rovers game, and York for the doubleheader, Pacific on Thursday. Lots of good games across the board. So get out while you can. These are some of the best memories I have are these Can't Champ games. They're certainly never short on drama.
No, got a little tear rolling down your eyes. Well said, Alex. But all right, guys, appreciate it. Drop a like, drop a sub, and we'll see you guys soon. Cheers, friends.